Hey, yeah you. Dragons. They're cool, right? And they're in Star Trek lore too. Hi, Rick here, and, well, dragons. One of the first references to dragons, or at least dragon-like creatures, is from the early 22nd century when Topol summarises a survey report from a Vulcan team in the Berengarian system. Specifically, they had been looking over the 7th planet in the system, an M-class world devoid of intelligent life. They had to recall the survey team because of nearby Orion Syndicate activity, but there was a brief addendum noting the presence of 200-metre long, winged lizards that could breathe fire. This was met with some scepticism by the crew, but the fact that it was from a Vulcan's official report sort of negates the possibility of it being a joke. Later on in the 23rd century, Spock would also reference seeing these creatures. What's more, the world was earmarked as a potential site for colonisation by Starfleet, and in 2156, in Apocrypha, it saw the beginnings of a scientific outpost alongside the Vulcan one. Turns out, there be dragons. Draco Berengarius was the designation selected for this species, and they varied in length from 15 metres to the reported hundreds. However, despite their appearance, scaled reptilian with 6 limbs including their wings, their behaviour was rather unlike dragons of mythology. These were primarily herbivores and could not fly based on purely the lift that their wings could generate. They were aided in lift by their specialised biology. They could extract hydrogen from the water they drank and store it in buoyancy glands within their body in the abdomen and tail. In addition to using their lighter-than-air gas to float, they could also expel it and ignite it to literally breathe fire. They were mostly docile, although there are documented instances of travellers being mauled by them. In 2156, during the opening months of the Earth-Romulan War, Berengaria was attacked from orbit by Romulan forces that bombed the Vulcan installation, and a great number of these creatures were caught in the blasts as well. Nice to see then that the dragons managed to get some measure of revenge when the Romulan ground forces got too close to their territory. The system was eventually retaken by the coalition of planets, but by 2293, Draco Berengarius was on the Federation's protected species list. The fascination with dragons does not end with Berengaria, however. The Hesperian dragons are native to the planet Hesperia, which sees a human colony on its surface by the late 24th century. Aside from it being an M-class planet with dragon-like creatures on it, the culture of its inhabitants was shaped by humans who sought to emulate Renaissance-era Earth without forfeiting the technological advancement mankind had wrought. Their technology was given a fantastical flair, and as they were not a Federation member world, it developed with its own unique style. Unfortunately, while much of their culture is shown, we do not get to see the actual dragons in the shows, but they are seemingly tame enough to be used as pets, although these utterances are spread from word of mouth, so mayhap these truths be feigned. I prithee partake of granules of salt upon ingesting this tale. Moving on. The planet Marivel also houses some flying reptilian creatures, however we never see these directly, only a species native to Lactra 7 that are apparently strongly resembling them. They are said to be resistant to phaser fire and appear to be more akin to winged snakes than traditional dragons or wyverns, but they certainly screech a lot. The most direct dragon that we see, now that the animated series has been added to continuity, is the tale of Kukulkan. In 2270, the Enterprise was dispatched after a probe entered into the core UFP territories and scanned their worlds, including Earth, before beaming its findings off into space and self-destructing. Kirk and crew followed the trajectory of the signal and eventually encountered a very powerful and strange alien vessel, one twice the mass of a Constitution class and surrounded by an energy field. Despite approaching it at warp, the Enterprise was seized by a force bubble generated by the approaching ship that resisted any attempts to push through, even at warp. It was also noted that the bubble prevented them from also simply splattering the Enterprise all over it, with what should have been a transluminal collision. Additionally, their energy weapons could not penetrate it, so we're talking a very powerful and advanced level of technology when compared to 23rd century Starfleet. The energy field that surrounded the belligerent, however, then shifted into the form of a giant feathered serpent resembling Kukulkan, the Mayan god. In mythology, there is a Yucatec and Itza Mayan deity of the same name. References to this Kukulkan appear to be both a god and individuals sharing the same name, confusing matters somewhat. Additionally, it appears that the Aztec god of similar description, and best Final Fantasy VIII summon, Quetzalcoatl also heavily influenced later depictions of Kukulkan. On top of this, many Mesoamerican groups from history have altering tales of Kukulkan and a variety of mythological stories concerning its place in their history, not to mention the many appearances of the feathered serpent god by different names. My research on these is likely to do that topic a disservice, so I won't dive too deeply into them all. Under the interpretation of Quetzalcoatl, he was associated with learning, writing, wind, fire, and the creation of civilization. Generally, his actions were seen as severe, occasionally duplicitous, but ultimately benefiting humanity and aspects of forming society. This feathered serpent in Trek is the last surviving member of his own species, who had succumbed to warlike behaviour and either been destroyed themselves or been wiped out. Kukulkan left his desolated homeworld and struck out on his own. Extremely long-lived, perhaps immortal, he eventually succumbed to the intense loneliness of his existence and began to visit other species. Back in 2270 now, he abducted members of the Enterprise and held them in a simulated environment aboard his ship. This was no holodeck, however, but an elaborate illusion created in the minds of the abducted using the hyper-advanced telepathic technology that Kukulkan had at its disposal. This appeared to be how he controlled his vessel, which was also home to many species of animal from all across the galaxy that he had taken an interest in protecting. However, they were all held in similar states of mental illusion while their bodies were kept healthy through life support. Still don't think that's all that great. The guy literally made the Matrix as a zoo. Anyway, he revealed to Kirk, McCoy, Scotty and Walking Bear that he had indeed visited Earth in its pre-warp days and taken an interest in humans. He had descended upon them, teaching them peaceful ways to guide their society over several centuries, and based upon the civilization that he had telepathically shown to Kirk and the crew, he had influenced several societies on Earth, ones separated by continents. The exact dates were not given, but it was during the formation of at least the Mayan civilization, potentially as far back as the early dynastic Egyptians some 5,200 years ago, from Kirk's time. He then left instructions with each civilization he visited on how to construct a utopian city that would have required their cooperation, gifted them an accurate calendar to record the passage of time and departed, presumably to find another species to guide. The schematics he had left were not only for a city, but a structure that could double as a transmitter. His plan was that when mankind united in peace to build this city, it would signal him to return, perhaps to evaluate his children, or to rule. However, this never came to pass, because humans weren't exactly ready for that level of cooperation, and still aren't, to be fair. So it was that time passed. Memories of Kukulkan faded into mythology and were interpreted a myriad of different ways by differing cultures. With no signal arriving from Earth, and to be fair, he waited for at least 2.5 millennia, he eventually sent a probe to find out what was up, the probe encountered in 2270. He was upset by what he had found, seeing how far mankind had developed, but how they had also developed powerful weapons, and he ultimately assumed the worst, hence this big display he was putting on in an attempt to humble and cow mankind into following his lessons once more, the path to peace that he had meticulously planned out for us. Kirk argues quite correctly that we are not children to be handheld to a peaceful solution, and that it would be meaningless anyway if we did not achieve it on our own. Eventually, Kukulkan is persuaded that he needn't interfere in the direction of mankind had taken, and he retreats with his menagerie once more. Putting aside the story, this is a direct reveal that a powerful entity once meddled in the cultures of Earth, as others have been documented to have done. The difference is, this one went on to inspire countless legends and myths across Earth, including the Mesoamerican gods, as well as the images of the dragon, the Chinese lung in particular, at least according to in-universe Trek lore. In addition to the alien fauna seen here, there are numerous other designs and renditions around the galaxy of dragons and dragon-like creatures, such at Bharat's space station, which had dragon-styled tables. Naturally, the real-life reason for this is, cheap props. But in universe, I like to believe this signifies that the pervasive dragon mythos of Earth is in fact as widespread as the Delta Quadrant, with creatures such as Kukulkan out there, as well as entities fond of posing as myths such as Q. The spreading of the mythology of dragons is not so unbelievable. So perhaps alongside these noted alien creatures, there's a race of monstrous beasties out there exactly like the ones from the fantastical tales, and if not, there's always the holodeck. Thank you for watching this video on dragons! Oh yeah, and Star Trek. I didn't just make this video because dragons are cool and I wanted to talk about them ever since I found out they existed in Star Trek 2. Okay, I've been Rick, thanks again, and goodbye.